My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm about to tell you the story of how the worst day of my professional life became the beginning of something extraordinary. It was a cold Tuesday morning in Chicago, November 15th, when everything I thought I knew about loyalty, business, and justice was shattered in front of 37 of my colleagues. I had been working at Morrison & Associates Marketing for 6 years. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, of sacrificing family dinners and weekend plans, of building campaigns that brought in millions of dollars for our clients. I wasn't just an employee. I was the backbone of that company's creative department, and everyone knew it. The morning started like any other. I grabbed my usual coffee from the little cafe downstairs, a large oat milk latte with an extra shot, and made my way to the 20th floor of the glass building that had become my second home. The elevator was packed with the usual faces: Jennifer from accounting, who always complained about her commute, Marcus from IT, who never looked up from his phone, and a handful of newer employees whose names I was still learning. "Morning, Sarah," Jennifer said with her typical forced cheerfulness. "Ready for another day in paradise?" I managed a smile, though something felt off. There was an electricity in the air, the kind you feel before a thunderstorm. Maybe it was just the pressure from the Henderson Electronics campaign we were launching next week. I had poured my heart into that project. 3 months of research, creative development, and strategy sessions that often went until midnight. The elevator dinged at the 20th floor, and I stepped out into the familiar maze of cubicles and glass offices. The Morrison & Associates logo gleamed on the wall behind the reception desk, all sharp angles and modern fonts that were supposed to convey innovation and success. To me, it had always felt like home, but today, something was different. Conversations stopped as I walked by. Eyes followed me with a mixture of curiosity and what looked like pity. My assistant, Emma, wasn't at her desk, and her computer was turned off, unusual for someone who was always the first to arrive and last to leave. I made my way to my office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of Lake Michigan. On clear days, I could see all the way to the horizon where the water met the sky. Today, the lake was gray and choppy, reflecting the overcast sky like a mirror of my growing unease. My desk was exactly as I had left it the night before. Neat stacks of campaign proposals, my coffee mug with the chip on the handle that I refused to throw away, and a small, succulent plant that my sister had given me for good luck. Everything normal, everything in its place. So why did I feel like I was walking into a trap? At 9:30 a.m., Emma finally appeared at my door. Her usually bright smile was replaced by a grimace that made my stomach drop. "Sarah, Mr. Morrison wants to see you in the main conference room," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "He said to bring your company laptop and access cards." The words hit me like a physical blow. In 6 years of working here, I'd never been asked to bring my laptop and access cards to a meeting. That only meant one thing, and we both knew it. "Emma," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What's going on?" She shook her head, finally looking at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry." The walk to the conference room felt like a funeral march. The main conference room was the largest meeting space we had, with a massive oval table that could seat 20 people and a wall of windows that looked out over the Chicago skyline. It was where we held client presentations, quarterly reviews, and company celebrations. It was not where you had private conversations with employees. As I approached the glass doors, I could see that the room was packed, not just with the senior management team, but with employees from every department. Marketing associates, account executives, junior designers, even people from HR and facilities. It looked like half the company was there, all seated around that oval table or standing along the walls. My hands were shaking as I pushed open the glass doors. The room fell silent, 37 pairs of eyes turning to look at me. At the head of the table sat Richard Morrison, the company founder and CEO, his silver hair perfectly styled and his expensive suit immaculate as always. To his right was Victoria Hayes, the VP of Operations, a woman whose smile never reached her eyes and who had always seemed to view my success as a personal threat. "Sarah," Morrison said, his voice carrying that fake warmth he used with difficult clients. "Please, have a seat." There was an empty chair directly across from him, positioned so that everyone in the room would have a clear view of whatever was about to happen. I remained standing. "I prefer to stand, thank you," I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. "What's this about, Richard?" He cleared his throat and opened a manila folder in front of him. Sarah, it has come to our attention that there have been some irregularities in your recent work, specifically regarding the Henderson Electronics campaign. My blood went cold. The Henderson campaign was my baby, the project I had been leading for the past 3 months. It was innovative, data-driven, and had already received preliminary approval from the client. What irregularities could he possibly be talking about? I'm not sure what you mean, I said carefully. The Henderson campaign is on schedule and within budget. We received positive feedback from the client just last week. Victoria Hayes leaned forward, her red lipstick stark against her pale skin. Sarah, we have evidence that you've been sharing confidential client information with outside parties, specifically with competing agencies. The accusation hit me like a slap. Around the room, I could see the shocked faces of my colleagues, people I had worked alongside for years, people I considered friends. Some looked genuinely surprised. Others seemed to be enjoying the drama. And a few, including Emma, who was now standing near the back, looked sick. That's absolutely false, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I would never compromise client confidentiality. I've been nothing but loyal to this company for 6 years. Morrison held up a hand to silence me, then slid a stack of papers across the table. These are printouts of emails from your company account, Sarah. Emails sent to Marcus Williams at Creative Solutions Agency, detailing Henderson's budget, timeline, and strategic approach. I stared at the papers, my mind racing. Marcus Williams, I knew that name. He had reached out to me on LinkedIn about 6 months ago, claiming to be interested in my work and asking if I'd be open to networking. We had exchanged a few messages, but I had never shared any client information with him. Never. These emails are fabricated, I said, my voice stronger now. I never sent confidential information to anyone. This is a setup. The room erupted in murmurs, but Morrison's voice cut through the noise. Sarah, the IT department has confirmed that these emails were sent from your account during business hours. We also have records showing that you accessed Henderson's files outside of normal working hours on multiple occasions. Of course I accessed the files outside of normal hours, I shot back. I was working on the campaign. I'd been staying late almost every night for 3 months to make sure everything was perfect. Victoria Hayes smiled that cold smile of hers. Sarah, we appreciate your dedication, but the evidence is clear. You've violated your confidentiality agreement and damaged our relationship with a major client. We have no choice but to terminate your employment immediately. The words echoed in the silent room. Terminated. Fired. In front of everyone I had worked with, everyone who had seen me pour my heart into this company. I felt my face burning with humiliation and rage. This is wrong, I said, looking around the room at faces that had once been friendly, now watching me like I was a criminal. You all know me. You know I would never do something like this. But I could see in their eyes that doubt had already taken root. In the corporate world, accusations stick, even when they're false, especially when they're delivered with such authority, such certainty. Morrison stood up, his expression almost pitying. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings. Your final paycheck will be processed within the week, minus any damages we deem appropriate. Damages? I laughed bitterly. What damages? I never sent those emails. I never betrayed this company. The Henderson Electronics campaign has been compromised, Victoria said smoothly. They're threatening to pull their account, which represents a significant financial loss. We may need to pursue legal action to recover those costs. Legal action. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. I looked around the room one more time, searching for even one friendly face, one person who might stand up for me. Emma was crying quietly in the corner. A few of my colleagues were staring at their hands, unable to meet my eyes. Others were whispering to each other, already spreading the gossip that would follow me for months. 2 security guards appeared at the door, and I realized that this humiliation was complete. Not only was I being fired, but I was being treated like a criminal, escorted out like I might steal office supplies or attack someone. This isn't over, I said quietly, but my words carried to every corner of the room. The truth has a way of coming out. Morrison's expression didn't change. Sarah, I suggest you focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on the past. References will be challenging to obtain given the circumstances. The walk back to my office was the longest of my life, Every step felt heavy, every breath labored. The security guards flanked me like I was a prisoner, and I could feel the eyes of my former colleagues following my every move. Some pretended to work at their computers, others openly stared, and a few took out their phones, probably already texting friends at other agencies about my dramatic downfall. In my office, I packed my personal belongings into a cardboard box that one of the security guards provided. The succulent plant from my sister, a framed photo of my parents from their anniversary dinner, a small coffee mug with "World's Best Marketer" printed on the side, a gift from Emma last Christmas. Everything else belonged to the company, including 6 years of my creative work, my client relationships, and my professional reputation. As I packed, my mind was spinning. Who was Marcus Williams really? How had someone gotten access to my email account? And why was Victoria Hayes so eager to see me destroyed? I had always sensed tension between us, but this felt personal, vindictive. The elevator ride down felt endless. Other employees got on and off, most avoiding eye contact, a few offering awkward, sympathetic smiles. By the time I reached the lobby, news of my firing had probably spread throughout the building. In the age of social media and professional networks, it would be all over the marketing community within hours. Outside, the November air was bitter and sharp, cutting through my blazer like ice. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching my box of belongings, watching people hurry past in their important business attire. An hour ago, I had been one of them, purposeful, successful, respected. Now I was just another casualty of corporate cruelty. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Emma. "I'm so sorry. They made us all come to watch. Victoria planned this whole thing. Meet me at Cafe Luna after work. There's something you need to know." I stared at the message, feeling the first spark of hope I'd had all day. Emma knew something. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I felt. As I walked toward the parking garage, I passed the little cafe where I had bought my coffee that morning. The barista who always made my latte, a young guy with kind eyes and a genuine smile, was visible through the window. He waved at me, and I managed to wave back, though I doubted I'd be a regular customer much longer. The drive home to my apartment in Lincoln Park was a blur of brake lights and gray buildings. I kept replaying the scene in the conference room, analyzing every word, every expression. The emails Morrison had shown me, I had never seen them before, but they were supposedly from my account. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Someone had planned this, orchestrated my downfall with precision. My apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller somehow. The modern furniture and carefully chosen artwork that had once made me proud now seemed hollow, temporary. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was connected to my career. Without that, who was I? I set the cardboard box on my kitchen counter and looked out the window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in those gleaming towers, were hundreds of marketing agencies and companies. But would any of them hire someone who had been publicly fired for corporate espionage? Would any of them take a chance on someone with a compromised reputation? My phone rang, interrupting my spiral of despair. The caller ID showed my sister Lisa's name, and I realized that I wasn't ready to explain what had happened. Wasn't ready to admit that my perfect life had just imploded. I let it go to voicemail and instead opened my laptop, my personal laptop, thankfully. I started researching Marcus Williams and Creative Solutions Agency. What I found made my blood boil. The agency was small, relatively new, and had recently won the Henderson Electronics account with a campaign that looked suspiciously similar to my original proposal. Someone had set me up, stolen my work, and destroyed my career in one perfectly executed move. The question was, who? And more importantly, how was I going to prove it? As the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I made a decision. I wasn't going to run away. I wasn't going to quietly accept this injustice. I was going to fight back, and I was going to win. I just had no idea how much my life was about to change, or that the key to my revenge was closer than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I woke up at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before my usual alarm. My body was still programmed for the routine that had governed my life for 6 years, but there was no office to go to, no urgent emails to check, no campaigns to review, just silence and the growing weight of unemployment. I made coffee in my quiet kitchen, the same brand I bought from the office cafe, but it tasted bitter and wrong. Everything felt off kilter. Like I was living in a parallel universe where the rules had suddenly changed. Yesterday, I had been Sarah Chen, Senior Creative Director. Today, I was just Sarah Chen, unemployed and possibly unemployable. My phone had been buzzing since dawn with messages from former colleagues, LinkedIn connections, and old college friends who had already heard the news. The marketing world in Chicago wasn't as big as people thought, and gossip traveled faster than wildfire. Most of the messages were variations of, "I'm so sorry to hear what happened," or "Let me know if you need anything." But a few were more pointed. One from Jake Martinez, a creative director at a competing agency, simply said, "Heard about yesterday. Brutal. Coffee sometime?" The worst part was knowing that behind every sympathetic message was the same question. Did she really do it? I was still in my pajamas at 11 a.m. when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Emma standing in the hallway, looking nervous and glancing around like she was being followed. I opened the door, and she practically fell into my apartment. "Sarah, thank God you're here," she said, her usually perfect ponytail disheveled. "I've been so worried. I tried calling, but you didn't answer." "I needed some time to process," I said, closing the door behind her. "Emma, what did you mean in your text yesterday? What do I need to know?" She sat down heavily on my couch, her hands shaking slightly. Emma had been my assistant for 2 years, but she felt more like a younger sister. She was 26, ambitious, and genuinely cared about doing good work. Seeing her this distressed made my heart ache. "It was all planned," she said quietly. "Victoria has been planning this for months." "What do you mean planned?" Emma took a deep breath. "Remember when you were out sick with the flu last month? Victoria had me give her your computer login information. She said IT needed to update something while you were gone." My blood went cold. "Emma, you gave her my password?" "I'm so sorry," she said, tears starting to flow. "She's my boss's boss. I thought it was legitimate. But then yesterday, after they fired you, I overheard her on the phone with Richard. She was talking about how perfectly everything had gone, how the emails looked completely authentic." I sank into the chair across from her, my mind racing. Victoria Hayes had used my login credentials to send those emails to Marcus Williams. She had framed me, stolen my work, and destroyed my career in one calculated move. "There's more," Emma continued. "The Henderson account? Victoria has been in contact with them for weeks, positioning herself to take over the campaign personally. She's been telling them that there were problems with the original creative team, that changes needed to be made. She was setting me up to fail from the beginning," I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "But why? What did I ever do to her?" Emma looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, there are rumors that Richard is planning to retire in the next year or two. Victoria wants to be his successor, but there's been talk that you were being considered for a senior leadership position. You're more popular with the staff, your campaigns are more successful, so she eliminated the competition." "I think so. And the way she did it ensures that you can't fight back. Who's going to believe you over the company's VP of operations, especially with those fabricated emails as evidence?" I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city where I had built my career and watched it crumble in the span of 24 hours. The anger I felt was clean and sharp, cutting through the humiliation and self-doubt. "Emma, I need you to do something for me," I said, turning back to her. "But it might put your job at risk." "What is it?" "I need you to get me copies of Victoria's emails, especially anything related to Henderson Electronics or Marcus Williams. Can you access her account?" Emma shook her head. "Not directly, but I might be able to get into her assistant's computer. Margaret sometimes leaves it unlocked when she goes to lunch." "It's too dangerous," I said immediately. "I can't ask you to risk your career for me. Sarah, what she did was wrong. You don't deserve this. Besides," Emma smiled grimly, "I'm already updating my resume, working for Victoria after what I've seen. I can't do it." We spent the next hour planning. Emma would try to access Margaret's computer during lunch when the assistant usually went downstairs to the building's food court. She would look for any emails between Victoria and Henderson Electronics, Marcus Williams, or anyone at Creative Solutions Agency. It was risky, but it might be the only way to prove what had really happened. After Emma left, I found myself pacing my apartment, unable to concentrate on anything. I tried to work on updating my portfolio, but every piece reminded me of my time at Morrison and Associates. I tried to watch Netflix, but I couldn't focus. Finally, I decided to go for a walk. Lincoln Park was beautiful in November, the trees bare but elegant against the gray sky. I walked along the lakefront path, the cold wind off Lake Michigan cutting through my jacket, but somehow making me feel more alert, more alive. Other people jogged past me, walked their dogs, lived their normal lives while mine hung in the balance. I was sitting on a bench, watching the waves roll in, when my phone rang. The number wasn't in my contacts, but something made me answer. Sarah Chen? The voice was male, older, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Yes, who is this? My name is David Kumar. I believe we have some mutual interests regarding your recent employment situation. I sat up straighter. I'm sorry. Who are you? How did you get my number? I'm an investor, Ms. Chen. I make it my business to know about talented people in the Chicago market. I also make it my business to know about irregularities in how those people are treated. Mr. Kumar, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I think you are. Why don't we meet for coffee? I have a proposition that might interest you. Every instinct told me to hang up. Strange men calling with mysterious propositions was not something I needed in my life right now. But something in his tone, something professional and calm, made me pause. What kind of proposition? The kind that might help you get your career back, and perhaps achieve a measure of justice in the process. An hour later, I was sitting in a small cafe in the Loop, nervously checking my watch and wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. I had chosen a public place with lots of people, but I still felt uneasy about meeting a complete stranger who somehow knew about my situation. David Kumar arrived exactly on time. He was in his early 50s, well-dressed but not flashy, with intelligent dark eyes and graying hair. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. Everything about him suggested success and wealth, but in an understated way. Ms. Chen, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. Mr. Kumar, I have to admit, I'm curious about how you know about my situation. He ordered a black coffee and settled into the chair across from me. I make it my business to stay informed about the Chicago business community. What happened to you yesterday was not as private as Morrison and Associates might have hoped. Meaning? Meaning that when you fire a respected creative director in front of half the company, people talk. And when those people have friends at other agencies, word spreads quickly. I sipped my latte, studying his face. So you know I was framed? I know that the official story doesn't add up. I also know that Victoria Hayes has been very busy positioning herself for a leadership role at Morrison and Associates, and that she's not particularly concerned about collateral damage. You seem to know a lot about Victoria. David smiled slightly. I know a lot about many people in this industry. It's how I've been successful. What do you do exactly? I'm what you might call a private equity investor. I identify undervalued companies, acquire them, and help them reach their potential. Often that means making significant changes to management and operations. A chill ran down my spine. Are you saying you're interested in Morrison and Associates? I'm saying that companies that operate unethically, that waste talent and destroy careers for personal gain, often find themselves vulnerable to acquisition. I stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. You want to buy the company that just fired me? I want to buy a company that has valuable assets, but poor leadership. The fact that they just lost their best creative director through their own corruption makes them weaker, not stronger. Even if that were possible, I said slowly, what would that have to do with me? David leaned forward slightly. Ms. Chen, I don't just buy companies, I rebuild them. And to rebuild a marketing agency, I need someone who understands creativity, who has relationships with clients, who commands respect in the industry, someone who has been wronged and wants to make things right. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Help me acquire Morrison and Associates, and I'll make you the CEO of the new company. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. CEO. Of the company that had just humiliated me, that had tried to destroy my career. The irony was almost too perfect. That's impossible, I said finally. Even if you could buy them, which seems unlikely, why would you trust me? You don't even know me. I know your work. I've seen the campaigns you've created, the results you've delivered. I've also spoken to several of your former clients who were quite upset to learn about your termination. You spoke to my clients? Former clients, technically. Henderson Electronics, for example, was very concerned when they heard about yesterday's events. Apparently, they received a very different story from Victoria Hayes than what actually happened. My heart started racing. What do you mean? I mean that Victoria told them you had quit suddenly, leaving the campaign in disarray. She positioned herself as the hero stepping in to save their project. They were quite surprised to learn that you had actually been fired for allegedly sharing their confidential information. They know the truth. They know enough to be asking uncomfortable questions. Questions that Morrison & Associates is struggling to answer convincingly. I sat back in my chair, my mind spinning. If clients were questioning the official story, if David Kumar was right about Victoria's vulnerability, maybe there was a chance for justice after all. Even if everything you're saying is true, I said carefully, how could you possibly acquire Morrison & Associates? Richard Morrison built that company from nothing. He would never sell. David smiled, and for the first time, I saw something cold in his expression. Ms. Chen, every company is for sale if the price is right and the pressure is sufficient. Morrison & Associates has some significant vulnerabilities that they may not be aware of yet. What kind of vulnerabilities? Let's just say that Victoria Hayes isn't the only one who has been cutting corners and bending rules. A thorough investigation of their financial practices might reveal some interesting irregularities. The implications of what he was saying hit me like a truck. David Kumar wasn't just a random investor who had heard about my situation. He had been watching Morrison & Associates, investigating them, looking for weaknesses. My firing might have been the opportunity he was waiting for. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Planning is a strong word. Let's say I've been interested in the company for some time. Your situation simply accelerated my timeline. And you want me to help you destroy the place where I worked for 6 years? Where I have friends? I want you to help me save it, he corrected. Morrison & Associates is a good company with talented people being led by corrupt executives. Under proper leadership, your leadership, it could be great again. I thought about Emma, about the other creatives who were probably just as frustrated with Victoria's management as I had been. I thought about the clients who deserved better than the political games and corner-cutting that seemed to be becoming normal. What exactly would you need from me? Information, contacts, inside knowledge of how the company operates, who the key players are, what their weaknesses might be. And eventually, when the acquisition is complete, your leadership to rebuild the company culture. And in return, 51% ownership of the new company structure, a significant salary increase, and the satisfaction of justice. 51%. Controlling interest. In 6 months, I could go from fired employee to majority owner of Morrison & Associates. It seemed too good to be true, which usually meant it was. Mr. Kumar, with all due respect, I don't know anything about you. For all I know, you could be a con artist or worse. Why should I trust you? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card and a thin folder. Here's my contact information and some basic information about my investment firm. You're welcome to research me as thoroughly as you like. In fact, I encourage it. I flipped through the folder quickly. Kumar Investment Partners had offices in Chicago, New York, and London. The portfolio included technology companies, manufacturing firms, and several marketing agencies. Everything looked legitimate, but I knew better than to trust appearances. Take some time to think about it, David said, standing up. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this have a limited window. How long? Call me by Friday if you're interested. After that, I'll pursue other options. Friday was 3 days away. 3 days to research David Kumar, to figure out if his offer was legitimate, and to decide whether I wanted to be part of what amounted to a corporate takeover. As he walked away, I sat in the cafe staring at his business card and thinking about the conversation with Emma that morning. Victoria Hayes had destroyed my career for her own advancement. She had stolen my work, framed me for corporate espionage, and humiliated me in front of my colleagues. The question wasn't whether I wanted revenge. The question was whether I was brave enough to take it. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Got it. You're not going to believe what I found. I smiled for the first time in 2 days. Maybe David Kumar was right about opportunities having limited windows, and maybe it was time for me to open one. I met Emma at a small diner in Wicker Park, far from downtown, and the marketing world where we both lived and worked. She had chosen a corner booth near the back, and I could see she was nervous, constantly glancing toward the door and fidgeting with her coffee cup. I feel like I'm in a spy movie, she whispered when I sat down across from her. Did anyone see you? I asked, though part of me felt ridiculous for asking. This wasn't international espionage, it was office politics. But after yesterday's humiliation and today's mysterious meeting with David Kumar, nothing felt normal anymore. I don't think so. Margaret went to lunch like always, and Victoria was in meetings all afternoon. Emma pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. Sarah, what I found? It's worse than we thought. I palmed the flash drive, my heart racing. What's on here? Emails going back 4 months. Victoria wasn't just planning to frame you, she's been systematically undermining you with clients, spreading rumors about your work, even trying to poach your team members. The weight of the flash drive felt enormous in my hand. This small piece of technology might hold the key to proving my innocence and exposing Victoria's corruption, but it also represented Emma putting her career on the line for me. Emma, I can't thank you enough for this, but you need to be careful. If Victoria finds out what you've done, she won't, Emma said firmly. I was careful. Besides, I told you, I'm already looking for another job. I can't work for someone like her. We spent the next hour going through some of the emails on Emma's laptop. What I saw made my blood boil. Victoria had been conducting a months-long campaign to discredit me, positioning herself as the reliable alternative while painting me as unstable and unreliable. One email to Richard Morrison from 6 weeks ago stood out. Richard, I'm concerned about Sarah's recent behavior. She's been staying late obsessively, her team seems stressed, and I've heard from Henderson that she's been difficult to work with. I think we need to consider whether she's the right fit for this level of responsibility. She's been lying about me for months, I said, staring at the screen, building a case against me so that when she finally made her move, everyone would believe it. There's more, Emma said, scrolling down. Look at this one from 3 weeks ago. The email was to Marcus Williams at Creative Solutions Agency. Not the fake emails that had been used to frame me, but real correspondence from Victoria's account. Marcus, the Henderson materials I shared with you should give you everything you need for your pitch. Remember, this arrangement benefits both of us, but it requires complete discretion. She gave him my campaign, I breathed. She literally handed over my work to a competitor, and then framed you for it, Emma added. She used your login to send fake emails to Marcus, making it look like you were the one sharing confidential information. I sat back in the booth, overwhelmed by the scope of Victoria's betrayal. This wasn't just about getting me fired. She had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to steal my work and destroy my reputation in the process. Emma, this is evidence of fraud, theft of intellectual property, maybe even criminal conspiracy. We need to take this to the police. Emma shook her head. Sarah, I stole these emails from Margaret's computer. They might not be admissible in court, and even if they were, Victoria could claim they were fabricated, just like she did with the fake ones. She was right. In the corporate world, email evidence was only as good as the chain of custody and the credibility of the source. Victoria had resources, lawyers, and the backing of Morrison and Associates. I had a flash drive full of stolen emails and a growing reputation as a disgraced former employee. My phone rang, interrupting my despair. David Kumar's name appeared on the screen. Ms. Chen, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Mr. Kumar, I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. I've been doing some research of my own today, and I thought you might be interested in what I've discovered. Are you free to meet? I looked at Emma, who was listening intently. Actually, I'm with someone right now who might be helpful to both of us. Can we meet somewhere private? An hour later, we were sitting in David's office in a gleaming tower in the Loop. The space was elegant but understated, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. David introduced us to his associate, Maria Santos, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who he described as his research specialist. Ms. Chen, David said, after we had explained what Emma had discovered, your friend has done excellent work. These emails confirm what we suspected about Victoria Hayes. What do you mean, what you suspected? I asked. Maria spoke up for the first time. We've been investigating Morrison and Associates for 3 months. What happened to you wasn't an anomaly. It was part of a pattern. She opened a tablet and showed us a timeline of events at the company over the past year. Employee turnover in the creative department was up 30%. 3 major campaigns had been mysteriously leaked to competitors. 2 senior creatives had been fired under suspicious circumstances, both after clashing with Victoria. Victoria Hayes has been systematically consolidating power, Maria continued. eliminating rivals, installing loyal subordinates, and positioning herself for a takeover when Richard Morrison retires. The problem, David added, is that her methods are not just unethical. They're destroying the company. Client satisfaction is down, employee morale is at an all-time low, and several major accounts are considering switching agencies. Emma leaned forward. So you're saying Sarah wasn't the first person Victoria has targeted? Not by a long shot, Maria replied. But Sarah was the biggest threat to her plans, which is why the campaign against her was so elaborate. I felt a mix of validation and anger. Validation that I wasn't crazy, that what had happened to me was part of something larger. Anger that Victoria had been getting away with this for months, destroying careers and corrupting a company that I had loved. So what's your plan? I asked David. Morrison & Associates is vulnerable right now, he explained. Richard Morrison is 68 years old and has been talking privately about retirement. The company's performance has been declining under Victoria's influence, and several board members are starting to ask questions. Maria pulled up another document on her tablet. We've identified 3 key board members who are unhappy with the company's direction. If we can present them with evidence of Victoria's misconduct and a solid plan for new leadership, they might be willing to support a management change. Or a buyout, David added. With the right pressure and the right offer, we could acquire controlling interest in Morrison & Associates within 6 months. Emma looked confused. But wouldn't Richard Morrison fight a takeover? Not if he believes it's in the company's best interest, David said. Richard built that company from nothing. He cares more about its legacy than his personal pride. If we can show him that Victoria is destroying what he built and that new leadership could restore its reputation, he might actually welcome the change, I finished. Exactly. And with you as CEO, the transition would be smooth. The staff knows you, respects you. Clients trust your work. It would be seen as a restoration, not a hostile takeover. The scope of what David was proposing was staggering. We weren't just talking about proving my innocence or getting Victoria fired. We were talking about completely restructuring one of Chicago's most respected marketing agencies. David, this sounds incredible, but I have to ask, what's in it for you? Why go to all this trouble and expense? He smiled, and I saw that calculating look again. Ms. Chen, I've been in the investment business for 20 years. I've learned that the best opportunities come from finding undervalued assets and fixing what's wrong with them. Morrison & Associates is a perfect example. Valuable brand, talented people, strong client relationships, but terrible management. And the profit potential? Significant. A well-run marketing agency in Chicago can be extremely profitable. Under proper leadership, Morrison & Associates could double its revenue within 2 years. Maria leaned forward. But David, show her the timeline. She needs to understand how quickly this needs to happen. David pulled out a calendar. Richard Morrison has a board meeting scheduled for next Friday, 1 week from today. We've heard through our sources that Victoria is planning to present a restructuring plan that would essentially give her complete control of the company. She's making her final move, I realized. Exactly. If she succeeds, she'll be untouchable. But if we can present the board with evidence of her misconduct before that meeting, we can stop her, I finished. More than that, David said. We can present them with an alternative, a buyout offer with new leadership that they know and trust. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 1 week, 7 days to gather evidence, build a case, and execute a corporate takeover that would change all of our lives. What would you need from me? I asked. First, we need more evidence, Maria said. The emails Emma found are excellent, but we need documentation of the financial impact of Victoria's actions. Lost clients, decreased revenue, increased turnover costs. I can help with that, Emma said quietly. I have access to the financial reports as part of my job. David looked at her seriously. Ms. Rodriguez, what we're asking you to do carries significant risk. If Victoria discovers what you're doing, she'll fire me, Emma finished. But honestly, I'd rather be fired for doing the right thing than keep working for someone who destroys good people. I felt a surge of affection for Emma. She was risking her career for me, for justice, for the principle that corruption shouldn't be rewarded. What else? I asked. We need you to reach out to your former clients, David continued. Not to share confidential information, but to let them know that you're considering new opportunities. Plant the seed that Morrison & Associates might not be the stable agency they thought it was. And we need you to start building a leadership team, Maria added. If we're successful, You'll need trusted people to help you rebuild the company culture. Think about who from your former team you'd want to bring with you. The conversation continued for another hour, covering logistics, timelines, and contingency plans. By the time Emma and I left David's office, we had a detailed plan for the next 7 days that would either restore my career or destroy what was left of my reputation. As we walked through the lobby of David's building, Emma grabbed my arm. "Sarah, are you sure about this? It feels like we're about to start a war." I thought about the humiliation of being fired in front of my colleagues, about Victoria's smug smile as she destroyed my career, about all the other people who had probably suffered similar fates at her hands. "Emma, sometimes war is the only way to achieve justice." That evening, I sat in my apartment with Emma's flash drive and my laptop, going through every email, every document, every piece of evidence we had gathered. The scope of Victoria's corruption was breathtaking. She had been running Morrison & Associates like her personal kingdom, eliminating threats and rewarding loyalty without regard for ethics or company interests. But as I read through the evidence, I also saw opportunities, client relationships that could be repaired, talented employees who were being wasted, creative campaigns that had been sabotaged by office politics. With the right leadership, Morrison & Associates could be everything it was supposed to be. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Chen, this is Marcus Williams. I think we need to talk. There are things about Victoria Hayes that you need to know." I stared at the message, my heart racing. Marcus Williams, the man who had supposedly received my confidential emails, the man whose agency had stolen my Henderson campaign. Why was he contacting me now? I called David immediately. "This could be the break we need," he said after I read him the message. "Or it could be a trap. Victoria might be using him to gather information about what you know. What do you think I should do?" "Meet with him, but in a public place, and record the conversation if possible. If he's genuine, he might have information that could help us. If he's working with Victoria, at least we'll know what we're up against." The next morning, I found myself in another cafe, this one in River North, waiting for a man I had never met but who had played a crucial role in destroying my career. Marcus Williams arrived 10 minutes late, a tall, thin man in his 30s with nervous eyes and the pallor of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Ms. Chen, thank you for meeting me," he said, sitting down across from me. "I wasn't sure you would. I'm curious why you wanted to talk," I said carefully, "considering that you supposedly received confidential information from me." He winced. "That's what I need to explain. Ms. Chen, I never received any emails from you. The first time I heard your name was when Victoria Hayes contacted me 6 weeks ago." My blood went cold. What did she want? She said she was leaving Morrison & Associates to start her own agency, and she wanted to bring some of their client accounts with her. She offered to share campaign materials for Henderson Electronics if I would agree to hire her as a partner once she left. She was planning to leave the company? That's what she told me. She said Richard Morrison was holding her back, that she deserved to run her own agency. She seemed to have it all planned out. I thought about this revelation. Victoria hadn't just been consolidating power at Morrison & Associates. She had been planning to leave and take clients with her. My firing had been part of a larger scheme to destabilize the company and make it easier for her to steal accounts. "Marcus, why are you telling me this now?" He looked genuinely distressed. "Because what she did to you was wrong. When I saw the news about you being fired for supposedly sending me confidential information, I realized what had happened. She used me to frame you. Did you keep any of her communications?" "All of them. I may have made a mistake in trusting her, but I'm not stupid. I documented everything." He pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots of text messages and emails from Victoria, all outlining her plan to leave Morrison & Associates and start a competing agency. The evidence was damning. Clear proof that Victoria had been planning to betray her employer while framing me for the very crimes she was committing. "Marcus, would you be willing to share these with others? To testify about what really happened?" "Yes," he said firmly. "I should never have gone along with her plan in the first place. The least I can do is help clear your name." I spent the next hour taking photos of his evidence and getting his contact information. By the time I left the cafe, I had what David would call a smoking gun, proof that Victoria had orchestrated my downfall as part of a larger scheme to betray Morrison & Associates. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. It was Emma, and she sounded panicked. "Sarah, something's wrong. Victoria called an emergency staff meeting for this afternoon. She's telling everyone that there's been a security breach, that someone has been accessing confidential files illegally. She knows, I said, my heart sinking. Someone told her about your investigation. I don't think so, Emma said quickly. I think she's just being paranoid. But Sarah, she's also announcing some kind of major company restructuring. She says Richard has given her authority to make significant changes. The timeline was accelerating. Victoria was making her move earlier than expected, probably because she sensed that something was wrong. We had planned for 7 days, but it looked like we might only have 7 hours. Emma, get out of there, I said. Don't go to that meeting. Come to my apartment and bring anything else you think might be useful. What about my job? If our plan works, you'll have a better job by next week. If it doesn't work, you probably wouldn't want to keep working there anyway. 2 hours later, my apartment had been transformed into a war room. Emma was there with boxes of documents she had managed to gather before leaving Morrison and Associates. David and Maria had arrived with laptops, phones, and what looked like enough legal paperwork to buy a small country. The situation has changed, David announced. Our sources tell us that Victoria is indeed planning to announce a major restructuring today, one that would give her unprecedented control over the company. We need to move faster than we planned. How much faster? I asked. Tomorrow, Maria said. We need to present our case to the board tomorrow morning before Victoria can fully consolidate her power. Is that even possible? It has to be, David said grimly. Because if Victoria succeeds in her restructuring, Morrison and Associates, as we know it, will cease to exist. She'll gut the creative department, eliminate anyone who might oppose her, and turn the company into her personal empire. I looked around the room at the faces of people who were risking their careers, their reputations, even their financial security to help me fight back against corruption. Emma, who had left her job to gather evidence, David and Maria, who were investing time and resources in a risky takeover, Marcus Williams, who had agreed to testify about Victoria's scheme despite the potential legal consequences. All right, I said, feeling a calm determination settle over me. Let's do this. Let's take back Morrison and Associates. The next 18 hours would determine whether justice would prevail or whether Victoria Hayes would complete her corrupt takeover of the company I loved. But for the first time since being fired, I felt like I was fighting back instead of just surviving, and I intended to win. The Morrison and Associates boardroom had never felt so imposing. I stood outside the mahogany doors at 8:45 a.m., wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would either restore my career or destroy what was left of my reputation. David Kumar stood beside me, calm and professional, while Maria Santos made last-minute adjustments to our presentation on her tablet. Remember, David said quietly, we're not here to attack anyone personally. We're here to present facts and offer solutions. Stay professional. Stay focused. Through the glass panels beside the doors, I could see the board members taking their seats around the massive conference table. Richard Morrison sat at the head, his silver hair perfectly styled as always, but I could see tension in his shoulders. Victoria Hayes was to his right, looking confident and composed, occasionally leaning over to whisper something in his ear. The other board members were a mix of longtime company veterans and outside investors. I recognized most of them from company events and presentations, but I had never spoken to them directly. Today, they would decide the fate of Morrison and Associates and my future. At exactly 9 a.m., Richard's assistant opened the doors and gestured for us to enter. The room fell silent as we walked in, all eyes following our movement to the 3 empty chairs that had been arranged at the opposite end of the table from Richard and Victoria. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built a company from nothing. Thank you all for attending this emergency board meeting. We have some unusual circumstances to address today. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her red lipstick stark against her pale skin. Richard, before we begin, I should point out that Ms. Chen is no longer an employee of this company. I'm not sure why she's been invited to address the board. Ms. Hayes, David said smoothly, standing up. Ms. Chen is here at my invitation. My name is David Kumar, and I represent Kumar Investment Partners. We've submitted a formal proposal to acquire Morrison and Associates, and Ms. Chen is an integral part of that proposal. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Several board members leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Victoria's composed expression faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Richard," she said, "this is highly irregular. We should be focusing on the company's internal restructuring, not entertaining unsolicited buyout offers." "Actually," Richard replied, and I caught something in his tone that sounded almost relieved. "The timing might be perfect. David, please proceed with your presentation." I felt my heart racing as David opened our presentation on the room's large screen. The first slide was simple: Restoring Excellence, a proposal for Morrison & Associates. "Ladies and gentlemen," David began, "Morrison & Associates has been a respected name in Chicago marketing for over 20 years, but recent events have raised serious questions about the company's direction and leadership." The next slide showed financial data that Maria had compiled: declining client satisfaction scores, increased employee turnover, and reduced profit margins over the past year. "These numbers tell a story," David continued, "of a company that has lost its way, but they also tell a story of tremendous potential being wasted." Victoria couldn't stay silent any longer. "This is absurd," she said, standing up. "Mr. Kumar, you're basing your analysis on incomplete information. The company has been going through a necessary transition period." "Ms. Hayes," I said, standing up as well, "may I ask what kind of transition requires firing the creative director in front of half the staff for crimes she didn't commit?" The room fell dead silent. Victoria's face went pale, then flushed red. "Sarah, you were terminated for cause. We have documentation." "Yes, you do," I interrupted, pulling out a folder. "You have fabricated emails sent from my account after you obtained my login credentials under false pretenses. You have a fictional narrative about corporate espionage designed to cover up your own theft of intellectual property." I walked around the table, placing copies of Emma's evidence in front of each board member. "What you don't have is the truth. And the truth is that Victoria Hayes has been systematically undermining this company for months, stealing campaign ideas, framing employees for her own crimes, and planning to leave Morrison & Associates to start a competing agency using stolen client accounts." The board members began flipping through the evidence, their expressions growing more serious with each page. Richard Morrison looked like he had been punched in the stomach. "These are serious allegations," said Margaret Foster, the board's longest-serving member. "Ms. Hayes, how do you respond?" Victoria was now visibly shaking, but she tried to maintain her composure. "These documents could easily be fabricated. Sarah has every reason to lie about me. That's why we brought additional witnesses," Maria said, opening the boardroom doors. Marcus Williams walked in, followed by Emma, and then by two other former Morrison & Associates employees who had been fired under suspicious circumstances over the past year. The room suddenly felt very crowded and very tense. "Mr. Williams," David said, "would you please tell the board about your communications with Ms. Hayes?" Marcus stepped forward, his nervousness obvious, but his voice steady. 6 weeks ago, Victoria Hayes contacted me about forming a partnership. She offered to share confidential Morrison & Associates client information, specifically the Henderson Electronics campaign materials, in exchange for a position at my agency." "That's a lie," Victoria said desperately, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus pulled out his phone. "I have text messages, emails, and recorded phone calls documenting our conversations. Victoria never mentioned Sarah Chen until after she had been fired. The confidential information came directly from Victoria, not from Sarah." The evidence was overwhelming, and I could see the board members' expressions changing from confusion to anger to disgust. Richard Morrison looked like he had aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. "There's more," Emma said, stepping forward. "Victoria has been systematically eliminating anyone she viewed as a threat to her advancement. She's been spreading false rumors about employees, sabotaging campaigns, and creating a toxic work environment that has driven away some of our best talent." One of the other witnesses, a former account director named James Park, spoke up. "I was fired 3 months ago for allegedly mishandling a client relationship. It wasn't until today that I learned Victoria had been telling the client that I was unreliable and suggesting they work directly with her instead. The pattern was clear, and the board could see it. Victoria Hayes hadn't just betrayed me. She had been betraying Morrison & Associates and its employees for months, all in service of her own ambition." "This is enough," Richard Morrison said quietly, but his voice carried absolute authority. "Victoria, you're terminated immediately. Security will escort you out. Richard, "You can't do this," Victoria said, desperation finally breaking through her composed facade. "I've given everything to this company. I've made it profitable." "You've made it corrupt," Richard replied, "and you've destroyed the culture that took me 20 years to build." As security guards entered to escort Victoria out, she turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "This isn't over, Sarah. I'll fight this. I'll sue you. I'll sue the company." "Actually," David said calmly, "you'll find that your employment contract includes some very specific clauses about corporate espionage and theft of intellectual property. I'd recommend consulting with a lawyer before making any threats." After Victoria was removed from the room, an uncomfortable silence settled over the board. Richard Morrison looked exhausted, older than his 68 years. "David," he said finally, "your timing is fortuitous. It seems we need new leadership more urgently than I realized." "Which brings us to our proposal," David replied, advancing to the next slide. "Kumar Investment Partners is prepared to acquire a controlling interest in Morrison & Associates for $75 million with the goal of restoring the company to its former excellence." The number was staggering, more than anyone had expected. Margaret Foster leaned forward. "That's a generous offer, but what guarantees do we have that you'll maintain the company's culture and values?" "The best guarantee possible," I said, standing up again. "I'll be the CEO." The room buzzed with surprised conversation. Richard Morrison studied my face carefully. "Sarah, 2 hours ago, you were a terminated employee. Now you're proposing to run the company?" "Richard, I never wanted to leave Morrison & Associates. This company was my home. These people were my family. Victoria took that away from me, but more importantly, she was destroying what you built. I want to restore it. What makes you think you can?" I took a deep breath. "Because I know this company inside and out. I know the clients. I understand the culture. And I have the respect of the creative team. More than that, I care about doing the right thing, not just advancing my own career." David added, "Sarah's leadership would ensure continuity during the transition. The staff knows her, clients trust her, and she has a proven track record of success. Under her guidance, Morrison & Associates could not only recover from recent setbacks, but actually grow stronger." The board members spent the next hour asking detailed questions about our proposal, our timeline, and our plans for the company's future. I answered questions about client relationships, staff management, and creative vision. David handled the financial aspects, explaining how the acquisition would be structured and what returns the board members could expect. Finally, Richard Morrison called for a private discussion among the board members. David, Maria, and I were asked to wait outside while they deliberated. "How do you think it went?" I asked as we sat in the lobby. "Better than I expected," David replied. "The evidence against Victoria was overwhelming, and your proposal to lead the company addresses their biggest concern about continuity." "But," Maria answered, "but Richard Morrison is essentially being asked to sell the company he built from nothing. Even if he knows it's the right decision, that can't be easy." 20 minutes later, we were called back into the boardroom. Richard Morrison stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "David, Sarah," he began, "the board has reached a decision. We accept your acquisition proposal with the following conditions. The purchase price will be $75 million as proposed. Sarah Chen will be appointed CEO, but she will report to a board that includes both existing members and Kumar Investment Partners representatives. And finally, we want a commitment that Morrison & Associates will maintain its name, its Chicago headquarters, and its core values." I felt my knees go weak with relief. "Richard, you have my absolute commitment on all of those points." He smiled for the first time all morning. "Then I think we have a deal." The next few hours were a blur of lawyers, contracts, and paperwork. By 5 p.m., the acquisition was official. Kumar Investment Partners owned 51% of Morrison & Associates. I was the new CEO, and Victoria Hayes was being investigated by both corporate security and potentially law enforcement. As the sun set over Chicago, I stood in what had been Richard Morrison's office and was now mine, looking out at the city where my career had been destroyed and reborn in the span of a week. Emma knocked on the door, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," she said, handing me one of the cups. "How does it feel to be the boss?" I laughed, the sound echoing in the large office. Terrifying, exciting, overwhelming, all of the above. "What's the first thing you're going to do?" I thought about that for a moment. Call a staff meeting. Let everyone know what really happened, apologize for the chaos of the past week, and start rebuilding the culture that Victoria tried to destroy. And after that? After that, we're going to make Morrison & Associates the best marketing agency in Chicago. We're going to win back the clients we lost, attract new talent, and prove that doing the right thing is also good business. Emma smiled. I can't wait to get started. As she left to prepare for the staff meeting, I remained at the window, thinking about the incredible turn of events that had brought me to this moment. A week ago, I had been publicly humiliated and seemingly unemployable. Today, I was the CEO of one of Chicago's most respected marketing agencies. The journey had been painful, frightening, and uncertain, but it had also taught me something important about justice, perseverance, and the power of standing up for what's right. Victoria Hayes had tried to destroy me to advance her own career, but in the end, her corruption had been her downfall. My phone buzzed with a text message from David Kumar. Congratulations, CEO Chen. I look forward to seeing what you build. I smiled and typed back, thank you for believing in me. This is just the beginning. Looking out at the lights of Chicago beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not just because I had won, but because I had won the right way. With truth, with evidence, with the support of good people who believed in justice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding a damaged company culture, winning back client trust, and proving that I deserved the opportunity I had been given. But tonight, I was content to savor the victory and remember that sometimes, when you fight for what's right, you actually win. The story of how I went from fired employee to CEO in 1 week would become legendary in Chicago's marketing community. But more importantly, it would serve as a reminder that corruption has consequences, that the truth eventually comes out, and that justice, when pursued with determination and integrity, can prevail. As I gathered my things to leave my new office, I paused at the door to look back one more time. Tomorrow, I would begin the work of restoring Morrison & Associates to its former glory. But tonight, I would go home, knowing that I had proven something important to myself and to everyone who had witnessed my journey. Sarah Chen was not someone you could destroy without a fight, and when I fought back, I fought to win.